Every morning for 11 months, I woke up feeling like the world had tilted 2 degrees to the left. Not enough to send me falling, just enough to make everything feel wrong. I am 67 years old. I spent 31 years as a high school principal in Dayton, Ohio. I have managed discipline committees, budget crises, angry parents, and one particularly memorable incident involving a student and a live chicken in the gymnasium. I have never been a man who frightened easily, but there is something deeply unsettling about waking up in your own bed, in a house you have owned for 23 years, and feeling like a stranger in your own body. My wife, Margaret, passed 4 years ago, breast cancer. We had 40 years together, and I will tell you honestly that the house felt like a museum after she left. Every room a different exhibit. The kitchen where she made her cornbread on Sunday mornings. The sunroom where she read her mystery novels. The garden she planted along the back fence that still comes up every spring, whether I tend it or not. Because Margaret chose perennials, and she always planned ahead. My son, Nathan, lives 20 minutes away. My daughter, Lily, is in Portland, Oregon. She moved out there after college and built a life for herself. Married a good man named Paul. Has 2 kids I see at Christmas when the flights are not too expensive. Nathan stayed close. I always thought that was a blessing. When I retired 2 years ago, Nathan started coming around more often. He would bring groceries sometimes, or stop by on a Saturday afternoon to help with something around the yard. I appreciated it. I will be honest with you. I was lonely, and a father does not like to admit that to himself, let alone to anyone else. So when my son showed up on my porch with a grocery bag or a 6-pack of beer and a few hours to spare, I was grateful in a way that went deeper than I probably showed him. About 8 months after I retired, Nathan brought me something he said would help with my energy levels. "Dad, you just look tired," he told me. He was standing in my kitchen, and I was at the counter making coffee, and the concern in his voice sounded completely genuine. It sounded like something I would have said to my own father. "I've been doing some research. There are these herbal supplement capsules, all natural. My buddy at the gym swears by them. I ordered you a month's supply." He set a brown glass bottle on the counter next to the coffee maker. The label was simple, printed on white paper. The kind of thing you order from a small wellness company online. It listed a combination of herbs I had heard of, vaguely ashwagandha, ginger root, something called foti, and a few I had not. I was not a supplement person. Margaret had been, toward the end, trying everything the oncologist suggested and a few things she found in magazines besides. But I was not. I looked at the bottle. I looked at my son. "Nathan, I don't need. Just try them," he said. 4 weeks. If you don't notice a difference, throw them out. I just want to see you feeling better. I started taking them that weekend. The first month, I noticed nothing. The second month, I began to feel worse. Not dramatically. Not the kind of worse that sends you to the emergency room. The kind of worse that creeps up behind you quietly. The way winter comes to Ohio one morning, you realize the leaves are gone and you cannot remember exactly when they fell. I was tired in a way sleep did not fix. My hands trembled occasionally when I lifted my coffee cup, just slightly, just enough that I noticed. I had headaches that settled in behind my eyes in the late afternoon. My appetite diminished. I lost 14 pounds between October and February, which my doctor attributed to reduced activity and aging metabolism. He ran blood work in November. He told me my cholesterol was slightly elevated and my vitamin D was low, both extremely common for a man my age in the Midwest in winter, and he suggested I spend more time outside in the spring. I believed him. I had no reason not to. Nathan asked about the supplements almost every time he came over. Not every visit, not in a way that would have seemed strange. Just enough. "Still taking those?" he would ask, and I would nod, and he would nod back and change the subject. He kept bringing new bottles. I kept running out, and he would arrive with another one before I could think to buy my own elsewhere. Looking back, there is a part of me that wants to shake the man I was then by the shoulders. But I understand him too. He was my son. He was worried about me. That is what I thought. In March, my hands got noticeably worse. Not a tremor exactly. More like a weakness, a reluctance in my fingers when I tried to button a shirt or hold a pen. I went back to my doctor and he ordered more tests. Neurological. He mentioned Parkinson's as a possibility, told me not to panic, told me we would monitor it. I drove home from that appointment and sat in my car in the driveway for a long time looking at Margaret's garden through the windshield, the early crocuses she had planted along the border, just starting to push through the cold ground, purple and white, stubborn and precise, exactly like she was. I did not call Lily that day. I told myself I did not want to worry her. The truth was, I did not want to say the word Parkinson's out loud to anyone I loved. I called Nathan instead. He came over within the hour. He sat across from me at the kitchen table and listened carefully while I told him what the doctor had said, and his face did exactly what a son's face should do when his father delivers news like that. Concern, sadness, a kind of quiet steadiness that felt like strength. He told me he would research specialists. He told me he would go to every appointment with me if I wanted. He told me he was not going anywhere. He also reminded me to take my supplements. Lily called me every Sunday. We talked about her kids, about the weather in Portland, about a book she was reading, about whatever I had been watching on television. In April, she asked me how I was really doing, with the particular tone she inherited from her mother. The tone that meant she had already noticed something in my voice and was waiting for me to catch up. I told her about the weakness in my hands. I told her about the weight loss. I told her about the possible Parkinson's diagnosis. I heard her breath change on the other end of the line. "Dad," she said, "how long has this been going on?" "Since the fall, more or less." "Since the fall," she repeated slowly. She was quiet for a moment. "Dad, I want to come visit." "Lily, you don't have to." "I'm coming in 2 weeks," she said. "Paul can handle the kids." "I'm coming." She came on a Thursday. I picked her up from the airport, and she hugged me for a long time in the arrivals lane and did not say anything, which told me she was startled by how I looked. Lily has always expressed her strongest feelings through silence. When she was 16, and I had to tell her that her cat had been hit by a car, she did not say a word for 20 minutes. She just stood in the kitchen and looked at the floor. She stayed for 5 days. She reorganized my pantry. She drove me to a follow-up appointment. She made soup from scratch and left containers of it in the freezer. On her 3rd night, she was sitting at the kitchen table after dinner, going through some of my medical paperwork while I read in the other room, and she called out to me in a careful, neutral voice that I recognized immediately as the voice people use when they do not want to alarm you. "Dad, what are these supplements Nathan's been giving you?" I came to the kitchen doorway. She was holding the brown glass bottle, turning it over in her hands, reading the label. "Just something he found," I said. "Herbal. He thought they might help." She set the bottle down on the table and looked at it for a moment. "I want to take one of these to a pharmacist tomorrow," she said. "Is that okay with you?" "Lily, they're herbal supplements. They're not going to. Humor me," she said quietly. "There is a Walgreens 3 miles from my house." But Lily did not take the bottle there. She drove to a small, independent pharmacy on the east side of Dayton, run by a man named Gerald Bauer, who had been our family pharmacist for almost 20 years. Gerald knew Margaret. He had helped us navigate her medication regimen in her last 2 years, with a patience and thoroughness that I still think about gratefully. He is in his mid-60s himself, soft-spoken, methodical, the kind of man who reads the fine print as a hobby. I waited in the car. Lily was inside for 45 minutes. When she came back out, she got into the passenger seat and sat for a moment without speaking. "Gerald wants to send the capsule contents to a lab," she said. "He's not going to tell me anything definitive yet. But Dad," she stopped. She put her hand over mine on the steering wheel. "He's concerned." He recognized one of the ingredients listed on this label. "It shouldn't be in a supplement." "What ingredient?" She said a word I had to ask her to repeat. "Paris green. An old compound," she explained carefully, as though she had just learned this herself in the last 45 minutes and was working to stay steady while she said it. Historically used as a pesticide, as a pigment in Victorian-era paints, it contains arsenic. Gerald had seen it listed on the label under a botanical name that sounded innocuous, tucked between the ashwagandha and the ginger root, And he had caught it because he had spent 30 years reading labels, and because he still kept a toxicology reference guide on the shelf behind his counter that he consulted more than anyone would expect. I sat in my car in the pharmacy parking lot, and I looked at my hands resting in my lap, and I thought about 11 months of supplements and 14 pounds of weight loss and trembling fingers and headaches behind my eyes and a force Parkinson's diagnosis that was not Parkinson's. Lily was watching me. "Dad," she said, "I need you to not say anything to Nathan," I told her. My voice came out steadier than I felt. I am not entirely sure why. Maybe 31 years of delivering difficult news to students and parents gives you a certain discipline around your own voice, even when everything underneath it is shaking. "Not yet. Not until we know for certain," she agreed. Her hand stayed on mine. The lab results came back 10 days later, after Lily had returned to Portland. She called me the moment Gerald contacted her. The capsules contained arsenic in a form that would accumulate in the body with daily exposure. The dosage in each capsule was not enough to cause acute poisoning. It was calibrated, if that is the word, for something slower. The kind of deterioration that looks like aging, that looks like a man in his late 60s declining the way men in their late 60s decline. I sat down at my kitchen table. The brown glass bottle was still on the counter where Lily had left it after taking one capsule for Gerald. I had not touched it in 2 weeks. I thought about every conversation I had with Nathan in the past year. Every visit. Every 6-pack of beer on the porch. Every time he had asked if I was still taking my supplements with that even, concerned expression. I thought about the will I had updated after Margaret passed, which left the house and the bulk of my savings split equally between Nathan and Lily. I thought about Nathan's ex-wife and the alimony payments he had mentioned once, and quickly changed the subject. I thought about the poker games he had referenced obliquely, the friends he owed money to. I am a man who spent 31 years in schools. I know what it looks like when someone is performing concern, rather than feeling it. I had seen it on the faces of students who broke windows and showed up in my office with perfectly rehearsed regret. I had simply never expected to see it in my own kitchen. I asked Lily to stay quiet for 1 more week. I needed to handle one thing first. I called my attorney, a woman named Sandra Okafor, who had drawn up our family trust, and who I had called exactly twice in 20 years, both times for things I hoped would not happen. I told her I needed to update my estate documents immediately, and I needed her to understand why. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. "Thomas," she said, "I need you to understand that what you've just described to me is a criminal matter, and I am going to strongly recommend that you contact the police today." "I will," I said. "I just need to do this first." She helped me. The will was revised within 3 days. Nathan's portion redirected. A conversation I had not planned on having until I was much older, if I was lucky enough to get there. Then I called Lily and told her she could bring Gerald's documentation and the lab results to the Dayton Police Department, which she had been ready to do for a week. On a Tuesday morning in May, 2 detectives came to my house. They were professional and thorough, and they asked questions for 2 hours, and they took the bottle of supplements as evidence, and they told me to expect that Nathan would be contacted before the end of the week. Nathan called me on Thursday evening. He said he had received a visit from detectives, and he wanted to know what was going on. His voice had a quality to it that I recognized from the kitchen table conversations, the practiced steadiness. Except now there was something underneath it that the practice could not quite cover, something that knew the ground had shifted. I had planned what I wanted to say. I had written notes, actually, the way I used to write notes before difficult conversations with parents in my office, because I have always found that clarity requires preparation, and preparation requires writing things down. But when I heard his voice on the phone, I set my notes aside. "I know what was in those capsules," I said. "The police know. Lily knows. Gerald Bauer knows. I want you to understand that there is no version of this that ends without consequences for what you did." There was a long silence. When Nathan spoke again, his voice was different. The steadiness was gone. What was underneath it was something I could not quite name and did not want to. He started to say something about pressure and debt and a situation that got out of hand and not meaning for it to go this far. I listened to all of it. I'm not going to tell you that I understand, I said when he had finished. But I'm going to tell you that I'm not going to pretend I've stopped loving you. A father doesn't stop. That's not how it works. But love and consequences are not the same conversation, and you're about to have the consequences conversation with people who are not your father. I ended the call. I sat in the kitchen in the quiet of the house, and I looked at the garden through the window. Margaret's perennials, purple and white along the back fence, coming up the way they always did, because she had chosen things that would outlast whatever came. Nathan was arrested 11 days later. The charge was felony poisoning. His attorney entered a not guilty plea. The case is pending, and I will not speculate about outcomes because I have learned in my 67 years that the justice system moves on its own schedule and does not accommodate predictions. What I can tell you is this. I stopped taking the supplements on the day Lily drove to Gerald's pharmacy. 11 months of arsenic accumulation does not leave your body overnight. I am working with a toxicologist now, an actual specialist, and the recovery is slow and not always comfortable, but it is moving in the right direction. My hands are better than they were in February. I can button a shirt without difficulty. I can hold a pen. I signed the updated estate documents without my hand shaking once, and I noticed that, and I thought that was worth noticing. Lily calls me every Sunday still. The calls are longer now. She does not pretend everything is fine, which I appreciate, because I raised her to be honest, and I would feel the pretending immediately. She asks me how I am doing in that voice her mother gave her, and I answer her truthfully, which is something I should have been doing for longer than I did. Gerald Bauer called me last week to check in. I had not expected that. He said that in 30 years of pharmacy work, he had seen a lot of things, but that he was glad his eyes were still sharp enough to catch a label when it mattered. I told him I was going to bring him a bottle of something good for Christmas, and he laughed and said to make it a nice bourbon, and I said I would remember that. I have thought a great deal in these past months about what I should have seen and when I should have seen it. It is a natural exercise, I think, for a person in my position. The mind reviews the evidence it had access to and asks why it did not assemble it correctly in real time. And the answer, I believe, is the simplest one and the hardest one. I did not see it because I did not look. Not because I was foolish, but because looking would have required me to consider something about my son that I was not prepared to consider. A parent's love is not always a protection. Sometimes it is a blind spot, and the people who wish to take advantage of that know exactly where to stand. I do not know what Nathan was thinking when he handed me that first bottle of capsules in my kitchen and told me he had done research and wanted to see me feeling better. I do not know if he believed at that point that it would go as far as it went, or if he had already thought all the way to the end. I do not know if there was a moment when he could have stopped and chose not to, or if the choosing happened so gradually that it never felt like a choice at all. What I know is that I am still here. I am walking in the garden that Margaret planted. I am making my coffee in the morning and watching the light come across the yard. I am talking to Lily on Sunday evenings and listening to her children's voices in the background. I am rebuilding, slowly and steadily, the way perennials come back each spring, not because someone tends them, but because that is what they were designed to do. There are people who will tell you that forgiveness is the final destination, that you cannot truly heal until you arrive there and put down your bags. I'm not sure I believe in that geography. What I believe is that healing and forgiveness are two separate journeys, and they do not always travel at the same speed. I am well along on the first one. The second one I am taking at the pace it requires, not the pace I am told it should. My son made choices that I cannot make sense of and may never fully understand. My daughter drove to a pharmacy and stood at a counter for 45 minutes and saved my life without telling me that is what she was doing. A man I have known for 20 years read a label carefully enough to catch what 9 months of doctors had not. People do extraordinary things, in both directions. That is the thing I keep coming back to. The capacity for extraordinary harm and the capacity for extraordinary care exist in the same world, often in the same family, sometimes closer than you would ever think to look. I am looking more carefully now. At everything. That is not a comfortable way to live. But I think it is an honest one. And after 67 years, I have come to believe that honesty, even when it costs something, is the only thing that actually holds. Margaret used to say that the truth has a weight to it and a warmth to it, and that once you learn to tell the difference between that and the feeling of being comfortable, you cannot unlearn it. I used to think I already knew that lesson. I am learning it again. Slowly. In my kitchen, in Dayton, Ohio. In a house full of 30 years of living. Watching a garden I did not plant come back up from the cold ground one more time.